Welcome back to GeorgieTech, and today I present you Logic's Ultra 85 FTP server. The Ultra 85 FTP server is a full-blown server. Now, keep in mind, you could do this at home with multiple spare parts that you might have in your garage. This was actually done with the old Spectrum Netgear router combo. I'm sure a lot of you guys might have anything like that laying around, and some hard drives. You never know, if you have your old DirecTV boxes, they do have some hard drives inside that could be repurposed. Now, keep in mind the performance of an FTP server by using secondhand equipment sometimes could, vary in as far as age, as far as how it's going to last. All right, so let's go ahead and get down to the actual equipment. So the Netgear smart Wi-Fi router combo that we end up using is the R6300. It is an AC router. So this particular model is the version 2. There was a version 1 and version 2. There was a few changes as far as hardware. But one thing that is unique to this one, in particular coming from Spectrum, is that it actually had its own version firmware running. And so that firmware actually was a modified version of its original firmware from Spectrum. And this only allowed for tunneling into your router in order for them to help you troubleshoot even better. The hard drives that we ended up using was a Skyhawk. It's a Seagate Skyhawk. It is a 1 terabyte that I did have laying around. The actual chassis itself actually came from a Snap AV older model analog NVR/DVR camera recorder. Now, one thing that inspired me to do it off this chassis was because of the power supplies. It has some power supplies that also had a multiple of 12 volt outputs, and that would allow me to provide power for the router and also for the hard drive itself. All right, so let's go ahead and actually get down and dirty inside this FTP server. So I actually made this product before actually thinking of making a video. But one of the things, just to kind of get you guys up to speed. So why the Logic Ultra 85? So listening to Logic at a younger age, Ultra 85 has always been something that Logic has pointed out, has been Easter eggs here and there. So it was something very kind of, for me, was very excited to finally get to hear the album, not just being released, but because I think of all time, my favorite album was the Incredible True Story. So the fact that we get kind of like a part 2 was something that I never expected, but I know it was hinted for a very long time. As far as for the feeds that we ended up using, I actually repurposed these risers. I believe, I forgot the actual technical term, but these risers actually were inside to be able to give a different platform for 2 different chipsets inside. It did have the original motherboard for the NVR itself, but it also had on top where all the drives were going to go. So that separation as a shelf, they used some risers. And so one of the things that I decided to do was to repurpose these, because I knew I wasn't going to use them. I knew I was going to use some of them, but overall I wasn't going to use all of them as far as on the repurpose side. So after a while, we're thinking of if this is going to be sitting down on a table, but the thing is that, we wanted to really showcase the Ultra 85 here. So we decided to be like, you know what? I wonder if these are the exact, I believe these are N4 screw sets. And so I said, you know what? If they fit here, perfect. Other than that, everything else is pretty straightforward. Not a lot of things were actually changed to the actual chassis, other than we did epoxy the front face here to cover for all the holes. Not just that, but we also go ahead and epoxy some of the under tray here to cover some of the other holes. This epoxy that we ended up using it's the same epoxy you use for if you were going to epoxy any like aluminum surfaces in your car. So since the chassis is metal, didn't really work well on the front plate here. and the reason for that is because the front plate is hard plastic. So it was kind of hard. It was bonding really super fast, and it got to a point where it was just like, by the time we have all these lumps and stuff. Now I'm not a professional in any of the epoxying, so that was actually my first time. But getting into the Ultra 85 here, this was all black. We ended up spray painting. We actually ended up doing some overspray here. But I think the other part that we saw is that I also added an Atari sticker. This was a custom Atari sticker, just because I know for Logic, I think it was one of his first or favorite game that he ended up playing, and he loved it. So actually looking inside of what actually consists of that we have here on this end. So this is actually original. This is one of the riser shelves that we ended up leaving. There was already a hard drive in set here. There was another tray over on this side risen up. Underneath had the original motherboard. So we ended up removing one and left the other one here to mount this hard drive. This hard drive actually came from a DirecTV hard drive. So it is a Seagate, like I said. And one thing nice that I liked about on these older DirecTV boxes is that there is an actual heatsink attached to the hard drive. So that was pretty neat. As far as on this side, we do have the Netgear router. So we went ahead and just pretty much modified the whole casing that it came with. And we ended up only leaving the bottom tray so that we could remount the motherboard for the router here. One thing that you do see here that is different from the original router is that we ended up adding a heatsink. Currently we are kind of modifying it and being a little cheesy with some zip ties here, just to kind of get some heatsink. Now you guys might criticize my work here. This was kind of done a little rush, so we might end up redoing this for a better solution, maybe even upgrading the router, since there are some limitations that we could dive into. On the bottom, so one of the things here, we do have the original power supply that came with the actual NVR, and I believe these are called Molex. These are going to be the actual 4-pin connectors that connect over for the hard drive, and we also repurpose them to power the router itself. We ended up adding also a grounding block here, or a terminal block, you would say. Grounding block over here. It's not even grounding anything, but it's just a terminal block that we ended up getting all the power supply Molex connections over to these terminal blocks, so that we're able to go ahead and just easily connect the power there. So as you see, we got power going over to the router itself, and then also over to the hard drive. And we ended up doing that just to keep it simple. The other part that I forgot to also mention is I'm also using a trip light. It is a USB 3.0 to SATA connector. This connects USB 3 over to the router to its USB connection, as we see. Actually, do you even see it? Yeah, it's right on the top here over. So we're powering the hard drive through the trip light. That's how we're actually getting the power itself. And then we're also powering the router here. Now the router itself has pretty much, since it's a router combo, it does have a WAN port and a LAN port. So what I end up doing is I repurpose some Ethernet cables over to this kind of old school phone keystone, over to this older phone keystone connection here. So we ended up keystoning these over so that we could have the the WAN port if we want to get this officially online, and then we also have the LAN port, if I ever wanted to maybe expand, maybe have like a secondary server. That'd be actually pretty cool. That I've been possibly thinking of doing. Now this guy does have its original fan that it came with. It is pretty loud, since we don't have the original logic from the NVR. And also too, the thermostat was actual on the logics on the NVR. Pretty much the fan is spinning at 100. From time to time I do see it kind of go down, and I'm not sure it's maybe because of fluctuation of power. There might be some voltage drop that we're having here as we're streaming. But overall, I think it was a pretty cool little project that I wanted to, do and eventually share to you guys. And as you see, we did do some wire management out there. On the back here, so where the power actually gets connected, it is powered by a 12 volt AC adapter, AC DC adapter. So I believe it, based on what we have right now, we are, I do need to have it at least at a 2 amp, 12 volt, just because anything under then it does performance, like it's just not good at all. And I noticed that from time to time the router would do a reset, just, and maybe lack of power there. As far as for the Ethernet port, I mean, yeah, the Ethernet ports here, for the LAN and for the WAN, we did ended up naming these as dock 1 and dock 2. So dock 1 here would be our WAN and dock 2 will be our LAN. I forgot to also mention here on the power supply, I did ended up labeling it as a hyperdrive, since after having or adding those risers for our feet, kind of make it look like more like a spaceship. So was I going for something like that? The answer is no, but it's just everything just came down and to it. Overall, the FTP server has been performing pretty well, other than the fans being loud. Now, what is inside the actual FTP server and what is saved in here? So as of right now, we do have loaded all of the albums or studio albums that Logic has ever released. So that's what it has here. It is running obviously the FTP. We have it unencrypted at the moment, so you can also do an SMB to it, so that you're not waiting for the song to download over before you're able to listen to the song. Now, one thing I think there is some throttling happening, since we did set up the router in bridge mode. It is also broadcasting a Wi-Fi out there, which actually is named Ultra 85. And the password for that one we ended up making to Rubik's Cube. And if you know, but overall, I mean, it's been fun. I think one of the next parts that we are going to be end up doing is that we might go ahead and start adding more of the kind of like the SoundCloud, not necessarily fully released albums, but we might add that there. So that's going to be cool to have there. But overall, I think it's gonna be well, we might also add some on Tarantino movies in here, just to kind of add to the collection anything that is Logic related. Now, I do want to make another video as far as getting actually in and down and dirty on the actual software side, on what's actually happening and how to actually set this up. It's pretty straightforward. There's not much tech savvy that needs to go, other than the actual physical stuff and making all the connections and all that. But I do want to dive into, so if you have like a router similar to this and it has a USB, then keep in mind it most likely might have the capability for you to do an FTP server, if you ever are thinking of ever doing something similar to that. Now, the name of this actual unit is Aquarius 3. So that is from Ultra 85 itself. And no, yeah, overall, I think it was a great little project that I had fun doing. It did take a lot of time on the epoxy and then the sanding and doing all that, and then eventually putting everything together, because I think that we first started with the actual hardware itself and to see if it was going to work in the first place. And once we knew it was going to work, when we tear everything apart, and then that's when we actually got into making the unit itself. But yeah, so stay tuned for the next video that I might release. Might make it into kind of a series, so we could dive in and potentially do some upgrades as we go, to make this even a better project, and just to have fun. I think the first thing I do want to do is to upgrade the router, but we'll see from there, and potentially maybe adding a secondary hard drive here for if we are going to be adding any of those movies that will take a lot more space on the hard drive. But thank you guys for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share to the world. And this has been GeorgieTech, and I've been excited on doing this for a very long time. So thank you guys for watching again, and we'll see you next time.